I appreciate that offering being taken, and I appreciate even more it being taken before my speech, so not as to be in judgment upon the speech, but very encouraged by recent gift that you guys, I think the Sunday school or the ladies fellowship here sent as well, so much appreciated. Well, I was thinking, it came to my mind just recently that you really get to know someone or something and understand someone or some agency or entity over the course of time. This is difficult. We all like in books to sort of skip to the end and see what's going to happen. And there's a bunch of things that I'm following lately. I don't know if anybody has followed this like I have. There's been a prison guard strike in New York. A couple of my church members are corrections officers. It's been a big deal. We're a village of 600 people, so I'm one of about 12 people who cares about our mayor election in the village coming up. And I've been following that so closely, and the politics and ongoings, and it's bewildering. And then I've been, through a friend, sort of been following the drama of the young folks in the season of love in our village as well, and who's interested in who, and you all these developments, and you just want to know, how is this going to end? But that's how life is, and it takes time to understand people. And I think I've been to this church a couple times, once 5 or so years ago, given a speech here, and then to the synod. Didn't know the church well or the people, but now seeing this church, especially the ministers, Dr. Blizzard and Reverend Brinegar, and soon to be Reverend Blizzard, I hope. And and having Jimmy work with Peyton work with us at our ministry for a season, you really get to see how it's going, and you start cheering for people. You start cheering for Amanda's homeschooling efforts, or for the good of this church, and a number of you that I've got to meet through the years. And so it's that developing over time that really helps us to understand people. And I love that. I'm trying to embrace that, because a friend of mine sort of said, with all of this drama going on in my own village with the relationships and the mayor election, just get a bowl of popcorn. And rather than trying to get involved, as I try to do, I tried to convince one of the mayoral candidates to drop out and support another, and they didn't get along with each other, so it didn't work out, and I was left frustrated. When it comes to politics, I think we should just get a bowl of popcorn and sit back and see what happens. But we definitely see that change in learning about things over time. And so it struck me that my presentation here is sort of that as well. Let's see how the ministry has been through the years. And if you were here some years ago when I gave a presentation before, you might have heard a little bit about how I got into this. I was working as an engineer. I did about 10 years of an engineering career, but felt called to ministry. It wasn't clear to me whether I was going to become a pastor. I'd never really thought about becoming a missionary. I didn't know that either of those things would happen, and then both of them happened. And so now I'm pastoring a small church in New York and running a ministry to the hikers on the Appalachian Trail, or Appalachian Trail, as some of the southern states say. I'm always confused in Florida because it's a southern state full of northern people. So I don't really know where we are, Appalachia or Appalachia. But we'll see more about how this has developed, especially since last time I was here. In the early days, before I even spoke at your church last time, I was always talking about an idea. Now we have a reality. And I hope you've heard quite a bit from Peyton. Hopefully it was positive too, about his time with us. Slave driver, making him work hard. He helped me build a fence around our property this last summer, which was the ministry. Some of my field director, people at PMU sometimes don't understand, like, what are you doing building a fence? It's very important. It's a very important endeavor. Try to keep everything contained. Good fences make good neighbors, and now maybe we'll get chickens and dogs and hikers and big party in the backyard there. Well, this is our ministry. So as far as looking over time, someone was asking about the trail. This was me a long time ago now when I was hiking on the trail. It's one of my favorite. I have a number of photos from this day. I think it was up in New Hampshire. So I'm 1,800 miles into a hike, 30 pounds down and 4 months growth on the beard. I had that idea, like if you any hockey fans, I know we're in Florida, but there's teams, some hockey. In the hockey playoffs, you might know they grow out their beards until the playoffs are over. So the longer your beard grows, that means the more games you've won, you've made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I thought as I hiked, I would just grow out the beard as a symbol of success. But then we started the ministry. This is a few years ago. First, my wife and I got married shortly after I hiked and finished seminary. We started the ministry really in North Carolina on a small scale. It's our daughter Maple. That photo's getting older now. And then our son Birch on the side there with the birch leaf. And I'm having trouble I think this is Evergreen. As our third child, Birch and Evergreen look a little bit alike, but Evergreen's on the left there, and then Maple, Birch, Evergreen in this photo as well. So our forest is growing. And so this is the little village that the Lord called us to. So I'm pastoring a church, which is now in the Bible Presbyterian Church. Kind of a long story how that happened, but the conclusion is that we're extremely happy in the Bible Presbyterian Church. My church is 200 years old, and I actually, a couple of years ago, wrote a long paper, did a lot of research. I found that sort of down over this side here, just outside of town, there was actually a precursor church in about 1780 that nobody even remembers or knows about, but I found one note in the local archives. A church that existed for about 23 years, and when it fell into disuse for reasons somewhat unknown, then my church and two others were built. So we have sort of a mother church that nobody knew about, but there is now almost 250 years of Presbyterian presence there in this very rural area, a village of 600 people surrounded by farmland, and of course with the Appalachian mountains going through with the trail, which is that green line just to the south of the village. So if you're an enterprising hiker like myself, you take a break from the trail and you walk the road, and you can stop for pizza in the post office and the general store, and then get back on the trail. And of course now they stay at SOLA right by the church. We have about 250 hikers a year stay with us as overnight guests. So we provide showers and laundry, which is just huge. I don't remember what the record is, but some of them go weeks without a shower, without laundry. We have Bibles. We invite them to church, interact with them in a lot of ways. It's, you might see, or you might remember from previous time I was here, there's this influence of Francis Schaeffer's L'Abri. And that's where my wife and I met, there in Switzerland. And this idea of a hospitality ministry, we've since been very influenced by Rosaria Butterfield's work as well with hospitality ministry. But really this sort of in-home idea. And it's hard to really pull off what Francis Schaeffer did. You know, he was really a once in a couple generation sort of figure to have the influence that he did. But I saw this existing community on the Appalachian Trail, and I said, these are the perfect kinds of people to be coming to a hospitality ministry. And so this developed out of my hiker experience. So again, that's the church there. We got a historic sign out front. Some of the facts on it are wrong. That's how it goes. I've studied the church history quite a lot, just out of interest. And then we do little local hikes occasionally, some of our church members coming back from a hike. And actually, so our church is the one with the red dome. This green one here is actually a Catholic church that closed down shortly after I arrived in the village, and it was not my fault. But the priest passed away, and the church, they said it had black mold. So it's closed down. It's been abandoned now. I'm sort of hoping it sort of gets leveled or something so people don't say, which church are you? We are the only church that's active in our village. In fact, the only church but one other in a 5-mile radius. And that's really strange for a person like me who grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who's lived in North Carolina and Texas, where in these places there's churches everywhere. And so where I am, really rural, small amount of people, there's challenges being a pastor, but I feel like I wouldn't want to go to a city where there's a dozen or 100 churches and it would feel like competition all the time. So I guess our competition is NFL football or something, right? It's not other churches. So what are you going to do on Sunday? So this is a few years ago. I'm wondering if I have any pictures here. Danielle Blizzard came up once and helped out. I don't know. I don't think she's in any of the photos, but some of our other friends helping here a couple years ago. Actually, back behind me there is Jonas Kalich from the Washington Olympia Church. Some of you might know Jonas. He's very active with mission work. Really good fellow. Some of the hikers. We don't usually let dogs stay, but that's just a picture of one staying there with us. This fellow, I remember this fellow, his trail name is John the Baptist. He's actually an Amish man. And I sort of surprised him. I was teasing him that he was on an extended Rumspringa. If you guys know anything about the Amish, they take a break where they get to see the world and then decide whether they should go back or not. His was it's sort of an extended adolescence. He was 25 and still hadn't decided, when I think most of them decide at 18 or 19 whether they want to go back to their community. But good opportunity to talk with people of all faiths that come through our ministry. I used to call this a two-man saw until we have a lady here helping as well. Now I make sure to call it a cross-cut saw. It's kind of a fun thing to... I got a picture somewhere as well with Eric Lash from the Grand Island Church over at our place volunteering. We were cutting some wood. We heat the house almost exclusively with firewood. I usually use a chainsaw, but it's fun to make people do some work. When people finish their hikes, they send cards to us. I just recently we had these all on our wall. I recently just put all those in the sort of a binder photo album. So when hikers are staying with us, they can look through. And it's one of these things where it's a small world. If you're a long distance hiker, you would look in our book and know some of these other folks. Sort of has found it's a small world here tonight that Mr. Mudge knows my father-in-law and grandfather-in-law. So I'm sure there's more connections here too if you just start asking around. But small world in the hiking community as well. We always put this board out there with the trail names. Everyone takes sort of an alias, a nickname while they're hiking, which kind of makes it fun. You kind of jump into a different world. And I think that's what I always loved about it when I was hiking too. And it's an extremely welcoming world where it's the only place really in America where like hitchhikes are still happening on the Appalachian Trail, and it's very well accepted, and people are just really well embraced. So we've been able to, I think, contribute to that feeling of embracing people, listening to them, talking with them about their walk. This was one of our bandanas. I think I did bandanas for 4 or 5 years as promotional items to our supporters and potential supporters. And then the last 2 years, you saw those patches and the stickers. Those are the 2 latest ones. I've been thinking a blog post soon is going to say bandanas are back. I just like alliteration, so we'll have to do bandanas again and come up with another design. That's something we sometimes have interns get involved with if they like to do artwork. Some are better at artwork than others. I won't comment on whether Jimmy is on the high end of artwork. We called him Jimmy. I know he's Peyton.
He's Jimmy.
He's Jimmy. He's still Jimmy. Both in my preaching and in the ministry at the Hiker Hostel ministry, I've always been a big advocate of focusing on the gospel and trying to explain exactly what that means. And so this tract that I wrote, and on the back it has 1 Corinthians 15 on it, has become a real big part of my ministry. I really like to emphasize the gospel and faith and grace and clarity on those things. In fact, I just gave a sermon this Sunday, some of the points were about clarity and plainness in speech. Here's some more hikers. Some more work going on there. And then one of the hikers, one of the very first hikers we ever had, an English lady who wrote a book. So we're in that book. I think we're in a few books now. Quite a story. So yeah, everything keeps developing. Here's before the fence. Peyton knows our yard very well after all that fence work. It's really quite amazing we didn't get injured. I had this, I tend to use all of my shop tools, everything sort of beyond their limit. And I do things, as a Dutchman, I do things in the most cheap way possible. So some people will dig holes and put in fence posts. The farmers take fence posts and they pound them into the ground. You don't have to use any concrete and they'll never get out again. But I didn't have a machine, so I pounded them in by hand with a sledgehammer, standing on a ladder. I think I got most of that done before you arrived, though. So you didn't get...
Who holds the post?
Oh, yeah. No, I think I was tapping them in and then pounding them in. I know I gave Peyton an opportunity to do a couple of them. Some more hikers there staying with us. This is actually a project I'm looking at doing soon, is this back deck here. And there's a roof over it. Everything leaks and it's bad. This is the only kind of little partially covered hiker outdoor area. I'm thinking of knocking this whole thing out and making it a lot bigger and waterproof so they have somewhere to keep their shoes and keep them dry. That's a project coming up. But yeah, we do a lot of laundry. That's a big thing. I think the last 2 years since we've started having the interns, I've done a lot less laundry and been able to free me up to do other things. But it's just such a blessing, I think, to the hikers and just an advocate. I was talking to Jim a minute ago about how as pastors we are servants. This is a strong example of servanthood, doing laundry for hikers. Of course, we do a lot of pancake breakfasts as well. This is actually what we have going on now. This is a picture from a couple years ago, but it's maple syruping season up in New York. This is actually a walnut tree. We made walnut syrup. We like to sort of really use our property. I had this idea a couple years ago. Sort of a hippie gardener guy has a sign that says "Grow food, not lawns." So I'm trying to have less grass to mow and more productive crops. Just doubled the size of the garden. We built a greenhouse last year. That was another one. I don't know if I have a picture here, but I got Jimmy on a ladder again building the greenhouse. There were no injuries. Did you get yourself with a hammer though at all in the thumb? Maybe once. But these are good. Those are reminders to move your thumb. It's good for you. Let's see, what else is going on? This is, I took these lyrics from an old classic rock song. Does anybody know this one? Long-haired freaky people, and said, "Please not apply," in the old song. I don't know if I've ever had anyone tell me correctly who the band was. Does anyone know the band? We changed it. It used to say, "Please, or do not apply." We say we want everybody, right? The band was called the Three-Man Electrical Band. I know there was a band called The Band back in the day, too. Some of you folks might remember The Band. I like to do these creative thank you notes. Did the church here get one of my more creative notes recently? I can't remember. I occasionally make notes out of things. I made these out of birch bark, and I sent one to my brother and gave him directions to find our house, and I said, "Follow the debarked birch trees to our place." I think that's shortly after we got there. Yeah, these are more recent. These are two hikers. I need to follow up with them. They were doing a short hike with us, recent graduates of Northwestern University in Chicago, and they were about to get on the Continental Divide Trail through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. And I hope they've succeeded on that. Some of you might know Kim Connor from the Reedy River Bible Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. He and his wife came down and were helping out for a few days. There's another recent one at the church. I think I'm holding a cast iron pan. We have a fellowship meal just once a month at the church. I know some churches that do it more frequently. I wouldn't mind. We do it once a month. And then just recently we had a fourth grade class come from one of the local Christian schools. They came on a hike with us and pancakes and saw the ministry, everything we're doing there. And then we have the hikers draw signs in the basement. We keep paint down there and wood slats for them. This one, I forget what cartoon this comes from, but it's the little bear saying it's all downhill from here. We have a lot of hiker jokes with the signs because it's never easy out there on the trail. It's really quite difficult. There's our more recent sticker. I hope everybody got one of those. I know there was quite a few of those. I've got a few more of the prayer cards, a few of the other things here, but hopefully everything else got passed out. We had here, this was this last year. Oh, there's a fellow you know. And we had a hiker here. It was our 1,000th guest to stay with us since we've been hosting hikers. This fella said this happens to him all the time, that he's the lucky one. We had that on my airplane flight this morning. They picked out row 27A or something, got a free 1,000 points. I don't know if those points are worth anything, but this guy was our 1,000th hiker, so we surprised him with ice cream and confetti on a hot day, and the sign there. So we try to do fun things. I think this is one of the more recent photos, the one we've used for the prayer card with my wife and I, and maple, birch, and evergreen. That spoon sadly is missing. This is his favorite toy, Soupy. I had to buy a new Soupy because he lost this one. I couldn't find quite that same ladle. His favorite thing is to dig, and Soupy is a digging spoon. Well, this is my reminder. This was at the church at Praying Mantis. So this is kind of the end of the slideshow. My reminder to pray for us. We certainly, are glad to have people's financial donations and volunteers, and we have our internship program now, but prayers are ultimately what is desired. And it's just, I think, one of the things I found in ministry, both in church ministry, but also in the missions, is that every day, every week is very different. It's a very versatile job. And I think that's why one of the reasons it's hard to find someone to be a pastor or a missionary is that your skills have to be so broad. And I feel very deficient at many of those skills. One day you're doing one thing, another day you're doing something totally opposite. I'm repairing the church, or I'm doing counseling, or writing a sermon. You have to be nerdy enough to write an 8-page paper and personable enough to deal with people and their problems. That's a rare combination. And so, looking at the ministry as well, it's, what is it that we do? Sometimes it's hard to say. I've brought people to the medical clinic when they were having almost a shock from too many yellow jacket stings on the trail. We've rescued people out of the rain. I had a hiker, turned out Lyme disease, tick bites, that stayed with us for a couple days trying to recover. And then probably of the 250 hikers a year, we probably get 25 of those into the church for the Sunday service. Of course, not all of them arrive on the right day of the week. We get others to come to our Wednesday prayer meeting. We get probably a few dozen a year take Gideon's Bibles from us. I've started doing some interviews with them as kind of an opportunity to talk deeper, do a half an hour or an hour recorded interview, and I think I've only posted 5 or 6 of them, but I've done a few more. I'd like to get more into that. But it's been a lot of juggling when there's the church and the family. I've been saying lately, I spend half my time with the church, half my time with the mission, half the time with my family, and half the time with woodworking and repairing our old house. So it's been very busy. And so quite a huge blessing to start having interns. We had a young lady named Malia 2 years ago, and then Jimmy Payton, the second year, and a young man from the Grand Island Church coming here shortly named William. I don't know how, our denomination obviously across the nation, it's pretty distant. I'm one of the few that's blessed to have these opportunities to speak at other churches, either as a minister or as a missionary, and to go to events. So I know people at most of the churches. Casey Sutherland and a few others do as well. But great people there and a huge blessing to us. So I wanted to just stop there, try to open it up for some more questions, especially if you have questions on the development. How has the ministry changed in this or that way? Because it's always changing.
How did they hear about it? Where are they?
So probably still the primary way is a guidebook. There's a couple different guidebooks. We have an entry in there. I think people still find us that way, but it's really leaning heavily now towards an app on their phone. And this app on the phone, I'm frustrated with them. It's a company called Far Out, and twice I've told them to correct my listing, and there are still issues with it. You can't seem to find our listing very well. You have to go into the village, scroll down and find it. So I don't think as many people are finding us as they might, but we're pretty busy at $250 a year. I figured theoretically we could probably host up to like 600 or 800 or something if we were packed every night, but we would be absolutely exhausted. So our visibility, I think, is good enough, and word of mouth certainly goes out there. I've seen people have showed me that so-and-so's video or website or whatever will mention us. So word gets out. I frankly think that it's the greatest deal you can find on the Appalachian Trail because it's a non-profit. It's a donation-based hostel. So nobody's ever come to us and not gotten their money's worth. If they don't have a good experience, they don't have to donate, I guess. But we've been fortunate in recent years to have a few donors to come up among the hikers. A lot of the hikers are younger. Some of them have no money at all, but quite a few of them are recent retirees, some of them quite wealthy, and have come on board with occasional donations. So it's been nice to have a diverse support range from churches, friends, family, and now a number of hikers as well. Yeah.
So this 250, that's only, 8 months of the year?
That's mostly compacted into about 5 or 6 months. And we see the occasional hikers in the colder season, but not much.
So they stop coming, September?
They come through September and October. I would say November is, months with no hikers is like November, December, January, February. So you might be right, there might be 8 months, but the first and last are light. So 6 months of real traffic. In June, July is our busy season. We'll have 4 people a night in June and July.
What's the max you can find in a night?
Basically 4 or 5 a night, yeah, is how we've managed it. Yes?
How far are you off of the trail itself?
We're about a half mile off of the trail. And that was probably my biggest emphasis when I was planning this, is trying to be near the trail. I remember staying at a lot of the places along the trail myself and how I would never walk more than a mile and a half, but maybe one time. And so we were down in North Carolina where I was an assistant pastor, and we were looking all over Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. Was thinking I would have to find a situation where I'd be an assistant pastor of a church and do this ministry. We never really found the land open up, never found the church either that needed the assistant. And then we saw that this church up in New York was looking for a pastor. And it was really, New York was never really on my mind, but it really has been a great fit. It was a church that was small, that needed someone bivocational. So when I called up and said I want to be bivocational, you can imagine they were pretty excited about that. And really we've grown well there, and the people at our church I think have embraced us so well. I've got a deacon and his wife who take my daughter and my older son out every week for a day, so that gives my wife a break. For a while it was called Maple Day. Maple would go, and then Birch is going too, so it was Maple and Birch, and it became Burple Day. We'd call it Maria Day, because Maria is the lady that takes them out. But just wonderful folks, I got two really solid elders as well, which, sort of, I don't know if it was my first question, but one of the first things I heard from them is that they believe in creation, as the Genesis account says. And from then on, I pretty much knew what the rest of their beliefs were. Right? If you get one or two of these fundamentals down, you probably got the rest. So it really has been a very healthy relationship with the church, not without its problems, like all churches, through COVID and other issues. Yes?
How near, do you have any medical facilities that you can call on people if you have an issue?
Not much. We do have an ambulance bay in the village to whisk people away. But the medical facilities, like everything else for us, is sort of 15 to 20 minutes in every direction. Middletown, Sussex, Warwick, and Port Jervis are all equidistant, and we're in the middle of a kind of a no man's land. Very strange for the East Coast. We're in one of the least populated areas for that seaboard, population.
How
Yeah.
many years have you been there now?
We've been there 6 years. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing too. We've always seen it as a very long-term ministry, both with the church and with the hikers, because you're building a reputation. We're starting to see a lot of hikers being repeat hikers, coming back maybe 2 years in a row or maybe after 5 years. And then we really see the change in their lives, hopefully in a good biblical way, and we hope with our prayers and with our efforts. It's always thrilling to meet up with these hikers and catch up after a few years. So we certainly hear about what's going on the trail as well. And many of you know this past year, the floods and the storms down in the south devastated the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. So there's been a lot of recovery efforts down there.
Would you be allowed to put any kind of arrow sign, go this way?
Yeah, they kind of frown on any signage or anything on the trail, and it's really not necessary because of the guidebooks and the apps on the phone, things like that.
Do people bring their children on these hikes?
Some, yeah, we've seen families hike. I think it gets more and more difficult. Pretty hard to hike even by yourself, but trying to find people that hike your same pace is really hard. And I can't imagine a family has people all hiking the same pace. So it would be pretty frustrating. Any other questions?
All right. Pastor Doug,
Thank you.
let me pray for you here if there's no other questions. Hope you learned something this evening. I did. I learned that my message aren't the right amount of length because I'm only writing 4-page papers instead of 8. So anyway, let me pray. Father, we thank you for Pastor Doug and for the ministry there at the SOLA Appalachian Christian Retreat. Father, I just pray for his family, Lord, as he ministers to them and ministers to the church as well, Father, that you would bless them, that you would increase their impact there, Father. Just guide and direct his steps to know what they need, Father. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you again, Pastor Doug.
Yes, and if anybody didn't get any of these things that we have, let me know.
There's a few extra here. I think there's a few extra that got put back on the back table again, too.
Yeah, thank you.